Hey, traveler. I heard the news.
Yeah, I know.
Listen, I was tempted to stay.
I know. I know. There's a lot of good stuff.
Hello, I'm Tommy. I'm Jan.
All right, so we are getting started since it is the hour. We have people joining us online. So, yeah. So this is good news. Well, you know, it's all good. It's all good. So, yeah. So this is another good news with Barret and Charlie as he creeps onto the screen here. Plays a little peek.
Hello. Hello, internet world. Whoever's out there.
Hello, hello, everyone. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome all to number, who knows?
Who knows?
40
what?
something.
Yeah, we're in the 40s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't look a day over.
I know, that's right.
You guys are so smart by now.
If only,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
we
yeah,
actually
yeah.
got smarter as we did this.
Hey, just make the whole thing disappear.
There's a whole lot we need to learn, obviously.
Yes, as we let go of the ego, are we letting go of brain cells too?
Well, we always like to start with our start. So we'll start with our start.
Yeah.
You
let's
ready?
do it. Let's do
Okay.
it.
You can do much on behalf of your own healing and that of others if, in a situation calling for help, you think of it this way. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I'm content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal.
So that's a great summary as we start of what we're doing here, right? We're really here to get our self out of the way, our small s self, so that our capital S self can shine. Or as Maureen, I was at Maureen Muldoon. She's just launched her third book. I was at her book party last night. One of her things is let your big ass self come out.
Big ass.
So big ass and big ass, yeah.
Big
So-
ass self.
Which I thought that was pretty cute.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. You want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. So we always like to start by just recognizing Ken Wapnick and the Foundation for A Course in Miracles. Ken Wapnick is the one who put this appendix together. This is a blow-up of an appendix in some of his books. And we utilize it on a regular basis. Barret and I consider ourselves Wapnickian, you know. We're devotees of his teachings, and he was the most prolific teacher so far about A Course in Miracles, and we just enjoy him so much. And so we do utilize his teachings as complementary teachings with A Course in Miracles. And so we start, you know, we always just do a little summary of what this chart is really saying, what this graph is saying. So one of the things that was working with me this week, we're in one of our groups, we're in a section, chapter 14, chapter 15, we're in that area. And there is a line in there that the truth is true. That's the entire sentence. The truth is true. And that's really what this represents. This is the truth, and it is true. And there is nothing else that is true. Heaven is truth. Oneness is truth. The Son of God is part of oneness. The Son of God is oneness. And so this line just is a picture for us of the truth and everything else that we have made up. The Son of God is made up in this, what's called the tiny man idea. And so this is just a depiction of how this has taken place. This tiny man idea seemingly entered the mind of the Son of God, and this was created, this sense of separateness, this sense of division from the Father, this sense of being other than, something besides, right? And really a thought of, I'm in charge of this new thing, you know, the Son of God is in charge of this new thing, not the Father. And this crazy thought, this crazy tiny mad idea has created this entire thought system, this belief system, that there is an ego, that we are separate from our Father, and that we are living our lives as a result of this. You know, we've created bodies, we've created separation one from another. You know, Barret is separate from me, and I'm separate from Janet, you know, and we keep it set up that way. And part of what we're going to talk about today, you know, the section that we're talking about today is Christmas as the end of sacrifice. So if you think for a moment, what our mind has told us to give up, right? Joy and peace and light, right? Reality, eternity, truth, love, changelessness. Our mind has told us to give this up, right? Sacrifice this to get this insanity, right? This is really the way we think. We think this is real and this is not. This is the truth, this is not. And that's the dilemma that we find ourselves in. So we're going to talk today about giving up this idea of sacrifice. Why do we want to sacrifice peace and oneness, joy and love for the insanity of separation?
Yeah. And since it is, winter out there, we have big piles of snow, even though the rain is falling today. I thought I would share. I have an especially large bounty of jokes.
Starting off
so, I think about it. Yeah, it's after the harvest season, but I thought, well, maybe these were hydroponically grown or something. So the first one, I'm just going to start right off. Actually, I'm going to start off with a couple from Janet, because she had some really good ones she sent me. So I do welcome jokes if people feel like they want to try to improve my my sharings. So last year I joined a support group for procrastinators. We haven't met yet. And then I decided to stop calling the bathroom the John and renamed it the gym. I feel so much better saying I went to the gym this morning. All right, no, I'll throw in one of my doozies as well. Breaking a leg during an audition ensures that you end up in the cast. So yeah, we aren't really talking about Christmas as the end of sacrifice. And as Charlie said, we have mistakenly sacrificed our truth for the idea that we are an individual self, right? This is the core issue that we keep coming back to. And it's pretty pervasive, right? Every day we get up, we think we're an individual self, right? We think that this body is what we are. So the idea of what the Course is teaching us, it seems pretty radical. And it truthfully is, right? This is a radical teaching. But it is also a teaching which goes right to the heart of the matter, which, as Charlie so helpfully pointed out, is the tiny mad idea of separation. The idea that we could be apart from love, the idea that we could be apart from joy. It's insane, but we've all mistakenly hooked into it and kind of gone down the rabbit hole, right? This whole projection arrow leads us into this world of time and space. So this is where it seems like we start. It seems like we start down here, right? When we start to get the realization that this isn't what we want, right? Like Helen and Bill, there must be another way. In some way, we've all said that, or maybe we've said it a lot of times. And that's the beginning of our journey, which is the miracle, which is forgiveness that brings us back into the right mind. So as this section that we're going to be talking about today so beautifully shares about, it leads us into remembering that we are first a right mind, and then we are the one mind. That's the journey that we're taking. So right at the top here, Jesus says, "Fear not to recognize the whole idea of sacrifice as solely of your making." And this section, by the way, is in chapter 15, section 11. So that's 327 in the third edition. So fear not to recognize the whole idea of sacrifice as solely of your making, right? And seek not safety by attempting to protect yourself from where it is not, right? So we're trying to protect ourselves from where safety is not. So there's no safety down here, he's saying, right? So all the things that we experience here in the world, we're seeking for safety. And we're trying to find it again in this relationship, in this job, in this career, in a certain number in my bank account. These things feel like safety to us. But what we're learning more and more, there's no safety in any of this, right? Relationships change, jobs end, bank accounts go up and down. We all see that happening. And so this flux is not a steady state. So when we try to plant our stake in this unsteady world, well, what happens? Well, maybe it feels okay for a day or a month or a year, but then, you know, the house breaks down, then the car breaks down, then the relationship breaks down. And we feel like we're bereft. You know, we feel like we're an abandoned child. But we can't really be abandoned. That's just a story. And we start to realize we want to place our, you know, our stakes in the ground on solid ground. So rather than on the shifting sands of time, we place them on the firm rock of God, of love, of truth. And this starts to reorient our whole life. And this reorientation process can be kind of turbulent at times. Jesus, even in the text, talks about that there may be a period of actual disorientation that you may go through. People studying the Course sometimes get a sense of vertigo in their lives. People have felt like rooms are spinning or things like that. And often it's not a long-lasting thing, but it can be an actual experience because we're actually going from this false foundation that we've had our whole lives and saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I want what, you know, brings me true peace and joy. And that shift, again, can kind of feel a little herky-jerky for a while, but it does lead us back into a right mind, which is where all of this is leading us.
Yeah, I was just, as you were saying that, I was just thinking that the word stubbornness came to mind. You know, our stubbornness, you know, there's an expression throughout this section of the chapter about casting out. We've cast out peace. We've cast out oneness. We've thrown this away. We've bought into the separation, right? And we've cast this out. And it's our stubbornness, you know, this is what just came to me. It's our stubbornness that won't let us look at that. You know, we down here, we believe we're right. We believe this world and the way it's set up and what's going on in it is true. We believe it's really happening, you know, and it's that stubbornness to see, right, that keeps us in this place of sacrifice, you know. Barret was just touching on, you know, looking how we look outside ourselves for that association, that whatever it might be, that's going to bring us peace, you know. We're too stubborn to look and see that the answers are already inside of us. We are in oneness. We are in the joy, right? And we look outside of ourselves, particularly in special relationships, to bring that peace and satisfaction to us. And it's something that he highlights right again early in this first section here. So he says, and you would bargain, your brothers and your father have become very fearful to you. So if we think of, you know, think of how we talk about our politicians. Think about how we talk about just different things in our lives, you know. This idea of separation is the association of fear. It's really what we're saying. We're fearful. You know, I need to be separate from you because you're going to take something I have. You're going to take my peace away. And you would bargain with them. This is with your brothers and your father. You would bargain with them for a few special relationships in which you think you see some scraps of safety, you know. So again, he's saying, give up the banquet table and come down here and have some scraps, you know. We're going to make some deal down here, you know, for a piece of scrap, right? Rather than the joy and the peace and the love that we can experience when we're sharing with our Father. When they are brought together, do not try longer to keep apart your thoughts and the thought, capital T, that has been given you. When they are brought together and perceive where they are, the choice between them is nothing more than a gentle awakening. And that's that concept, you know, instead of settling for this special relationship, instead of settling for this story of separation, we can recognize and we can see that there's an option, there's a different choice that we can make. You know? So where he says there's a gentle awakening, what we're really talking about, there's this concept in the Course about taking darkness to light. So we're down here in this experience, and we're having in darkness, right, in this confusion, in this lack of peace. And what we want to do is take that experience as we're having it, as we're experiencing it, and take that to the light, right? This is the other teacher inside of us. The Holy Spirit is that other teacher. Anything that's going on here in our thought, in our minds, anything that's going on down here in the world that we've created can all be handed over to Holy Spirit, you know, and say, let me see this differently. Let me see it from your perspective, you know. This is the relationship I want. This is the special relationship that I want to believe in, I want to understand, I want to experience, right? It's experiential for us at this point. we were getting a little story this morning of an experience that somebody had in a group setting where all of a sudden the words are just flowing. The channeling is just taking place. You know, there was no preset motivation from the ego saying, do this because you need to, do this because it's important, do this to save the other, right? It's all of a sudden it's just flowing because it's the Holy Spirit's perspective. The Holy Spirit's guiding, you know, our participation in that particular communication, you know, which is something we're going to get into here as well. But yeah, so again, you know, we have this banquet going on up here, the feast, right, with everything you could ever want, and we're choosing the scraps down here.
So, yeah, such good stuff, right? There's a section just a little before this in chapter 12 called the sane curriculum, right? So the sane curriculum is the right-minded curriculum. The ego's curriculum is very insane, as we know, right? When we listen to that one, it leads to suffering. So in the section, he starts out by saying, only love is strong because it is undivided. This is page 225. Only love is strong because it is undivided. The strong do not attack because they see no need to do so. Right? So when we find ourselves in a place of strength, right? This is not muscular strength. This is not, you know, dropping bombs on people kind of quote unquote strength. This is the strength of inner certainty, knowing that we are one with our Creator in the face of no matter what happens outside of us. And again, Jesus did provide us a pretty inspiring example to show that he could be at peace even when his body was being killed, because he knew that he wasn't really a he, right? He knew that he was just one with love itself. And that was all. The rest of it was just a shadow. The rest of it was just sort of a game. The rest of it was just a play that was unfolding. But he had no fear. He had no fear because he knew that what he was could not be attacked. Not at all. And that's, again, it's sort of shocking, but again, that's a little more the Easter story, I guess. But it brings us back to how can we let this Christ within ourselves be born, right? How do we let the light come forward? Well, the work is always, always, always in identifying and looking at, with gentleness and kindness, the shadows within ourselves. The fears that we have, the judgments that we have, the unkindnesses that we have, the ways that we think anyone is less than us or greater than us. These things are all false ideas within us. Anything that doesn't reflect equality and oneness and truth, it's actually untrue. And a part of us is kind of scared of this idea, or maybe really scared, I should say, because what it says is that all of these beliefs that we have set our life, we built our life upon these things, our human life here, we're actually saying, no, that's not true. I remember being in a course study group years ago, and one of the people said to me, but I'm a good person, right? You know, I said, no, sorry, you're not a person. So this is a belief that she had that, again, was threatened by this concept that we're teaching here. The concept that only love is real, right? So that this, again, is what non-duality means. This is a non-dualistic teaching, right? When we break down the word non-dual, it means not two. There are not two. There is not a multiple number of things here. There is just one. Right? Above this line, which is what is still true, it's only true, there's only one. Once we had the tiny mad idea of separation, then all of a sudden it seemed like there was more than one. It seemed like there was God and something else, which is what we were. And that's where fear set in, that's where guilt set in, that's where shame kind of came from. All of these things started percolating in the mind once we thought we were apart from love. Well, it kind of makes sense, right? If God is love and oneness and truth, and we're somehow not God, if that's what we're thinking we are, then we have to be something other than love. We have to be something other than peace. So this is the genesis. Again, not a real genesis, because it didn't really happen, but it seemed to happen within our experience. This is where all of that started, all of the darkness and shame and guilt. And it's actually the origin of all of that in us. as we go through our lives, we don't necessarily think about like guilt all the time. We're not walking through the grocery store thinking, oh man, I got to deal with this unconscious guilt that I have. No, we're thinking I got to get the cucumbers or whatever else on the list.
Usually the ice cream aisle.
Ice cream aisle. There you go. That's where the guilt comes in. Get those Snickers ice cream gallons.
That's the bar of the freezer, right? Guilt. The sign. 2 for 1 guilt.
Get the extra large pizza too. So yeah, well, we're not usually doing that all the time, but it's actually kind of under the undercurrent of all of the upsets we have, all of the shame we have, whether it's in the ice cream aisle or whether it's anywhere else, whether, as Charlie likes to share, it's the drivers on the road, whatever it is, maybe people cutting in line at the grocery store, maybe just watching the news and seeing the latest catastrophe that's unfolding on the world scene. All of these things become our classroom, our opportunity to realize that that is not actually why I'm upset. Not upset because I did go to the ice cream aisle and now my pants are tight, right? I'm not really upset by that. These are all just pointing us back to the one root of all of this. The one genesis of all of this false idea is the thought, again, that we're separate from God. And the good news is we're always sharing the good news. It never happened. It never happened. What does that mean? If we really look at that deeply, if we get that this never happened, what is this saying? Everything down here never happened. In a big way, that means nothing has happened. Nothing has ever happened. Right? And again, this is a shaky one. The ego hates this, right? The part in us that's attached to being me hates this idea. Because if nothing happened, then Barret didn't happen. In truth, right? There's no Barret up here. There's no individual up here. Again, this is where the fear comes in around these concepts. Because a part of us is so desperately clinging to the body and to the personality, to this idea that this is what I am. To be told it's not, it feels shaky, right? I don't know, you might even be able to feel that right here as we're talking. So, with that, I'll hand it over.
So, as Barret just mentioned, the good news is that this is a little earlier. We're talking today from chapter 15, but in chapter 14, there's a section called the happy learner. The Holy Spirit needs a happy learner in whom his mission can be happily accomplished. You who are steadfastly devoted to misery, Charlie, right, must first recognize that you are miserable and not happy. So first we have to understand this. So when I find myself, and we talk all the time about the warning bells, right? We find ourselves angry at the other driver. We find ourselves upset with our spouse. We find ourselves judging somebody. We find ourselves criticizing somebody. We find ourselves doing all the things we do in our daily, what's the matter with, look at these cucumbers, they're rotten, that type of thing. First recognize that you are miserable, not happy. The Holy Spirit, right, our other teacher inside of us, cannot teach without this contrast. For we believe that misery is happiness. We've sold ourselves this bill of goods that the scraps from the table are okay, right? This lousy meal that I'm having here, this leftover bread and chunks of meat, right? The fat and the gristle are all that I get. And that's really great. That's really super. I'm so happy now, right? It means absolutely nothing. You do not realize that the foundation on which this most peculiar learning goal depends means absolutely nothing, which is what Barret was just saying. This means absolutely nothing. It's not real. And right down here, I mentioned earlier the great sentence, the truth is true. The truth is true. Nothing else matters. Nothing else is real. And everything beside it is not there. Everything beside truth is not there. There is no duality. Right? Let me make the one distinction for you that you cannot make, but need to learn. Your faith in nothing, your faith in this thought system, your faith in this belief system, right? Your faith in nothing is deceiving you. Offer your faith to me, right? The other teacher. Offer your faith to me, Jesus. Offer your faith to our Father, and I will place it gently in the holy place where it belongs. You will find no deception there, but only the simple truth, and you will love it because you will understand it, which is getting back to this concept of this being experiential, right? When we recognize this, when we have that holy moment, when we have that bit of clarity that comes through, we are in peace, right? We're not in this confusion. The two cannot be in the same place, right? This does not exist. When I'm experiencing the truth, instead of this misery that I've chosen, when I'm experiencing the truth, I cannot be experiencing this. I do not experience separation. I do not experience duality, right? So what Jesus is saying here is, the Holy Spirit wants to have a happy learner. So how does that manifest in this physical world for me, right? It manifests by catching myself all the time, choosing the misery, choosing the gristle, right? Choosing this horrible scraps left over from the banquet, right? And recognizing that I'm doing that and simply letting go of that. Simply taking, as I said earlier, taking the darkness to the light. This is the darkness, all these experiences that I create over here. The misery is mine, right? The misery is all made up by me, right? It doesn't exist in heaven. It's not part of oneness. Misery, right? Vulnerability, sacrifice, this whole concept of sacrifice. I have to give something up to get. That's not part of heaven, right? But that's a story I tell myself down here all the time, I'm in lack. It's another great story, one of my favorites, I'm in lack. I'm missing something. Something's not working right here. Basically, for me, it's always around finances. I'm always in lack financially. It's a story I create for myself. It's not real. It doesn't make a difference, right? I can take that fear when it comes up. I start to cook a story up, right? It's almost like I'm at the chopping board. I'm cutting up the veggies for the salad. Instead of that, I'm cutting up this is a bad deal. And this, I'm going to get screwed over here. And then, I'm sitting at the cutting board making all this huge garbage salad up, right? And that's just what it is. It's all garbage. It's all stuff I'm creating. That fear is not real, It's just reinforcing my separation.
What's the salad dressing you put on top?
Oil, but not olive oil. Yeah, black, dark oil. Yeah, used motor oil. Yeah. Mostly that. So anyway, I just, but again, getting back to that word that popped in my mind before, it's the stubbornness, It's the stubbornness that I hold on to this, I want to hold on to this fear. I want to hold on to this idea that I'm somehow, there's something special going on here. This is going to be a really good salad. It ain't.
Yeah. But the ego loves those salads, right? The ego eats it up, right? The ego needs fear to survive. You think about it, right? The ego needs guilt to survive. Ego needs shame to survive. These are the lifeblood of the ego. And as long as we're attached to that, we're also believing that is our lifeblood as well. This is why, this awakening to truth is something that we're almost also heavily defended against. There's such a strong fear of actually doing this. I mean, we all know, right? We've been doing this for a while. We know that even though we get these concepts, we see how we don't use them in our life, right? We see how the latest upset comes, and rather than going right to Jesus, we do decide to eat our garbage salad for a while before we catch ourselves. Well, why would we do that, right? Well, but just because we're afraid. We're afraid of coming back to our truth. It's not a sin. It's not something we should be shameful about. But it is something it's helpful to acknowledge, right? To say, if I wanted this without reservation, I would be choosing you all the time, Jesus. And I'm not. I see that I'm not. This is really helpful and healthy to see our resistance, right? Because it's in seeing the resistance that we actually start to heal it. It's in acknowledging our fear of God that we actually start to release it. So we don't want to hide that. We don't want to put on a spiritual mask over our anger, over our fear, and just pretend we're fine because we're course students. We don't want to do that. We want to let these things be seen while we're holding Jesus's hand. Right? Look at these dark shadows within with kindness and compassion. This is the path through. This is the path through. And it's why, to be honest, A Course in Miracles is not as popular as other spiritual paths, because Jesus is asking us to do some heavy work. And he knows it's not really that heavy, right? He knows that it's just the merest veil that we brush away. But he knows how scared we are of it too. And that's why he's so gentle, even as he's talking about all this ego stuff. He's so loving and kind. He wants to lead us on like you would lead a little child through a little bit of an obstacle course. You take their hand and say, no, you don't want to step over there. There's some brambles there. There's a little hole there. Don't step in that. Just gently led all the way through the path. And sometimes we say, yeah, I'll go with you, Jesus. And then we actually feel better. And then other times we say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to, like the terrible twos or something. No. And Jesus, throughout the Course, he calls us things like child and infant and baby. He describes us as spiritual novices, which we are, to be honest. So it's not a pejorative kind of thing. It's just an accurate description of where we are on the journey. So again, I have to share this bountiful crop that I've come up with here this time. So the machine at the coin factory just suddenly stopped working, and there's no explanation. It just doesn't make any sense. Why did the Quaker give up his orchestra tickets? Because he had taken a vow against violence of any kind. I actually came up with that myself.
That's as good as all the other ones.
Such a very nice back. The old backhanded compliment. All right, one more before I move on. What did the cantaloupe say to the honeydew? You're one in a melon. Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. So Edith always says I should run them by her before I bring them to you. She'll tell me which ones are good and which ones I should replace.
But I actually think the one that you did at the end of your last round was the perfect Course in Miracles joke, because that idea of break a leg and cast is all open to you, which whatever you choose, right?
Yeah.
So I like that.
Well, they're all free to reuse, so I gift them to you as much as you would like to take them. So I did want to mention one thing about we're talking about the feelings of anger and things like that, and in chapter 12 again, Jesus says, whenever you become angry with a brother, for whatever reason, you are believing that the ego is to be saved and to be saved by attack. If he attacks, you are agreeing with this belief, and if you attack, you are reinforcing it. So, right, this is the ego thought system. It's always about attacking. It's always about competition. It's always about lack and scarcity, as Charlie was saying. There's not enough to go around, right? We know from studying this that the ego's motto is one versus another, right? This is the ego's creed. This is what keeps the ego going. And the Holy Spirit's motto is together or not at all, right? That we wake up to our oneness together or not at all. And as Jesus says, when he awoke, we were there with him, right? Why? Because the awakening's already happened. This whole journey is over, right? We think we're down here, but we're kind of like trapped in a rerun. It's already been filmed. It's already been done. We're just watching it replay out in front of us. The concepts of time are a little tricky, but I think it's helpful to think of this because a lot of times as we kind of realize we're down here and that there is a journey back to our right mind, we feel like, oh my God, I have so much fear I need to let go. I have so much judgment. This is a mountain that's maybe feels too big for me to climb. But when we get that it's all done, that the climb is already over, maybe not fully in our experience yet, but in truth it is, then it's like, oh, okay, well, I can't not accomplish this because the accomplishment is already done. I think to me that sort of heartens me and it reinforces me when I get into these, ego funks to say, okay, maybe I'm going through a rough patch here, but
It's guaranteed.
it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed. The deal is done. It's already signed, sealed, delivered. So.
Yeah, we talk a lot about healing in our discussions about A Course in Miracles, and the healing that we're talking about is healing of the way we think. It's not healing the body. We spent the last couple of sessions in our groups here talking about that, kind of clarifying it, But this concept the other day, this understanding for me came the other day that this healing and salvation are the same thing, right? This recognition that the dream never took place, right? That this never happened. That is the healing that I need. That is the recognition of salvation, right? This idea of oneness. Being in this oneness is the truth. Again, truth is true and nothing, and there is no duality, right? So just one last thing about that, this section in the Happy Learner, right? When you teach anyone that truth is true, you learn with him. And so you learn that what seemed hardest was the easiest. Learn to be a happy learner. Barret just used the word simplicity when he was just speaking now, right? This is a very simple concept. The truth is true and nothing else is. It's a very simple concept. And yet we struggle with it so much because we so firmly want to deny that is the case. We want to believe this story of victimization. We want to believe this story of scarcity and lack, right? And so we keep telling ourselves, we keep sending. It's a great section in the Course where he talks about sending the messengers out. Go out here and bring me back a message that proves this. And I can do it over and over and over again with every driver on the road, with every discussion and judgment that I want to make. I can get that message back. If you would be a happy learner, you must give everything. How much? If you would be a happy learner, you must give everything you have learned to the Holy Spirit to be unlearned for you. And then begin to learn the joyous lessons that come quickly on the firm foundation that truth is true. Barret was just touching on a foundation. There is a foundation here. Truth is true. There's no foundation here. And Jesus is telling us we need to give everything, every story we've got going, this concept of always being vigilant for God and his kingdom, right, is one of the lessons of the Holy Spirit. Always be vigilant for God and his kingdom. Everything that's coming our way gives us an opportunity, in a joyous sense, to go to Holy Spirit, to go to God, go to Jesus and say, here, I'm giving this up, right? I can do this happily. It's not pulling teeth. I don't need to be in misery because I'm giving up my misery. That's really what the ego's asking for, Don't do this. You're going to be miserable. Don't give up my story. You're going to be absolutely miserable. That's what the ego wants us to believe, right? Because why? This concept of self, the small s self, right? Not the big S, the big S self, but the small s self, right, is the ego's, that's the ego's story, right? And that's what's going to be given up. It's going to disappear. That's perfectly okay. So, the following section on this is the decision for guiltlessness, and the beginning sentence on this is the happy learner cannot feel guilty about learning. This is so essential to learning that it should never be forgotten. So again, if you think about this for a second, he's telling us, look, you're going to be in these situations, you're going to put yourself there, you can go to Holy Spirit and give this thing up and enjoy the entire time. It's like once you catch yourself, having made the choice to buy into this, right? It's nothing more. There's no reason to be guilty about it. There's no sin that's been manifested. There's nothing. It was just a bad choice. It's all it was. It was an error in my thinking, right? And that's what I want to correct is my thinking here. I want to think with Holy Spirit, not with the ego. So there's an opportunity to enjoy every single time you catch yourself having chosen the ego. It's like, wow, look, so my driving, right? Oh, the son of a bitch just cut me off. but seriously, it's my thinking about it. I wasn't cut off. There is no son of a bitch, right? Those are stories this wants to tell me. This thought process wants to tell me. The truth is, it's just simply another lesson, Oh, look, Charlie chose wrongly again, make another choice. Let's work with Holy Spirit instead. That's a much more joyous way of spending my day, right? Hanging with Holy Spirit, taking that hand in the morning and saying, let's go. Taking Jesus' hand in the morning and saying, let's go do this today. That's a much better way of starting off the day than getting out of bed going, oh, Jesus, how am I going to pay these bills? Which can be one of my other stories, my sense of lack, So, but anyway, I just kind of wanted to touch on that for a second, that, we had this opportunity, and this is kind of what this whole Christmas thing is about, really. We're talking about, remember, again, the title is Christmas as the end of sacrifice, right? Sacrifice is all done down here. There's no sacrifice in heaven. There's no sacrifice in oneness. There's no separation. There's no duality in oneness, right? So Christmas is this representation. There's a star. This reading talks about the star in the heaven. There's a light in the darkness, and it represents the light inside all of us. That light is who we truly are, right? The light is who we truly are. And this story of Jesus being born and, and this light showing up, the star showing up in the darkness, and all these odd characters being there, right? All these, and if you think about the odd characters that show up, it's the shepherd and the magi, and who else is there? The donkeys and the cows, and I don't know, who's there. But it's all these odd characters that show up, and they're all just part of the oneness. All of it, The light shows up in the shepherd. The light shows up in the kings that show up, and the light is there inside all of us. And that's something that, Jesus is trying to point out here. This special time of year is a time for us to reflect on that. We've created this beautiful story of this birth, right? And this Son of God showing up. Well, the Son of God is everybody in that story. It's not just the child that shows, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to share a little example of this, right? Like, how does this work in our lives, and how does it actually make a difference? So, some of you might know a little bit of my family story is that my fiance Edith and my mother do not get along. They do not like each other. They've hardly seen each other for several years. And there was a seeming opportunity to join together for Christmas this year. My mom had said, yes, why don't you two come over? And then about a week later, a few days ago, my mom said, this is stressing me out too much. Why don't you two not come? So, this is like drama, right? Like family drama. And how did I work with this, right? I worked with it by acknowledging the emotions I was feeling, by letting them come up, but at some point, like, using these concepts then too. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, like, this has been kind of an ongoing story for 7 or 8 years in different forms in my family. So one of the things about forgiveness is it's cumulative. So again, a few years ago there was a fairly similar story playing out, and I was like not a happy camper. I was trying to kind of work it and do it, but I was really not at peace. And what I've been experiencing this week is predominantly peace, predominantly happiness, predominantly, okay, it's going to be what it's going to be. It's all good. It's all good. Everyone's doing the best they can. There's no blame here in any way. And when fear does come up, when judgment does come up, to use these principles, to use the idea of the miracle, to remind myself, again, there is no bad guy here. Why? Because there's not really a bad guy at all, right? You could say that the ego is sort of the original bad guy, but the ego never happened, right? There is no ego. This is one of the things we're learning here, is that the separation did not occur. And that's what the ego is. The ego is the thought of separation from God. So,
Not the fact.
What's that?
The thought, but not the fact.
It's a thought, but not a fact. It's a thought that never really occurred, but we hooked into it somehow. And then this whole world sprang from it. So that's why, as we talk so much about the ego, this is kind of a helpful point, is that the ego is not the real problem. Why? Because nothing cannot be a real problem, right? The problem is that we buy into the ego. So it's our belief in separation. That's the real issue. And that's what we're working on undoing. We're working on undoing our idea that the separation really happened. And so, again, just in my personal story, using these concepts to acknowledge my sadness, to acknowledge my disappointment, to acknowledge the feelings of victimization, but then to step out of them by remembering, I am the Holy Son of God. Nothing has really happened. There is no loss of love, no matter what appears to happen on the world of form, no matter what the different characters are doing. I'll share another aspect of this sort of healing that's happened for me. Is this was maybe over 5 years ago, when, again, this similar family dynamic was playing out, and I was, again, feeling very much the victim of it. I was at a different Course in Miracles group at a Unity church, and we were kind of doing a meditation. And in that meditation, all of a sudden I had an image in my mind. And the image was the scenario that's playing out in my family, all the different players. But instead of seeing them as like human bodies, I saw them all as puppets, as though I was looking at a stage of puppets, standing up here, and all the puppets were 1 or 2 feet tall. So they were kind of small and a little bit apart from me. And all I saw, when I saw it like that, what I also had the knowing in that moment, all of the people in their different parts of this drama were asking for love. That again, even though there was this outer experience of separation and maybe attack in different ways that was playing out, that everyone was asking for love. And it just really helped me to release a lot of the judgment that I was feeling and a lot of the condemnation of myself or others in the situation that I was experiencing, so that I could feel better. I could feel more peaceful. And this is the journey that we all take. So, and this is what the Course does for us. So obviously we're talking about this chart and Ken Wapnick. So I also wanted to share with everyone this book that I've had for the last few years since it came out. It's called From the Lighthouse, an anthology. And this is the writings of Ken, and some are Ken and Gloria Wapnick. They had a newsletter as long as Ken was alive, where they published 4 times a year. And each newsletter had an article in it. The articles, each of them is a gem. I mean, one of the things that I sometimes find a little challenging with Ken and his bigger works is that it's so big, right? I mean, he writes a whole book full of this stuff, and it's like, wow. Each of these are like 4 to 6 pages, pretty easily digestible on different aspects of the Course teaching, but it all comes back to this non-dualistic truth. And I was reading it this morning, and I just really wanted to share something from one of his articles. This article is called "High Above the Thorny Roads of Fear: Choosing the Road Less Traveled," from 2013. And here he says, "With great authority, though always tempered with kindness and gentleness, the words of A Course in Miracles resound in our hearts, perforating our defensive walls with a seemingly relentless softness that brooks no opposition, its benevolence never opposing illusion. It is this kind and gentle authority that is continually presented to our thought system of separation, specialness, and judgment, and that strikes terror in the core of our separated self." So this is how the Course changes us, right? It doesn't attack the ego. It just keeps revealing to us that the ego is not true. So there is no conflict energy. There's just a shining a light. When you shine a light on a shadow, what happens? The light doesn't attack the shadow. The light just reveals the shadow is nothing at all. And that's what happens here. We're coming to see that all of this, all of our fears, all of our guilt, all of our shame is actually nothing, right? And in order to do that, as Charlie's saying, we need to be willing to hand it over. We need to be willing to give it to Spirit, to give it to Jesus, because it's only in our holding it close that we prevent it from being healed and undone. And again, this is tricky because we don't always want to see this. And most of these dynamics happen under the surface. But what we do is we just do our best with everything that shows up, every layer that surfaces. We again hand it over. We hand it over again and again and again. And then we get to the point where we're done. That's the other thing that's really good about this path, as opposed to other spiritual systems, is this path teaches you get to a point where you're done.
Mhm.
You don't need to forgive forever. Why? Because when you have let go of the ego 100%, that's the happy dream that Charlie was mentioning. That's where we go. That's where we're all going to achieve at some point. When we have set aside the ego for the last time, then we're equivalent to the Jesus or the Buddha or these other enlightened masters. We're at that place where nothing really bothers us. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I love that little reading right there. As you were reading it, I was just reflecting on my experiences working with the Course and reading the Course, and how the moment of clarity will come about something I'm reading. Because as Barret's saying, the complexity of the language sometimes can get a little heavy. But when that moment of clarity comes, it's just such a soft, beautiful understanding. It's just an acceptance. It's just all of a sudden it's this realization of, oh yeah, and I feel it right in my heart. I just feel that connection. I feel that understanding. It's experiential at that point. It's an experience I'm having when that clarity comes. And that's really what he's saying there. It's just absolutely beautiful. And again, so doesn't it take us right back to the joy? That's such a joyous experience to have that understanding, have that clarity, have the light shining through on the darkness that I was struggling with, right? And when the light is shining through, it's a release. It's freedom, right? I no longer have to buy into the story. I no longer have to buy into that salad, I don't have to buy into that story anymore. I can be released from it. And that is a joyous experience, it's experiential. And that's what is being offered to us here by Jesus, When you think of Helen sitting down for 7 years and writing this thing out, and when she asked, why me? Jesus said, because I knew you'd do it. She wasn't even a teacher of the Course in a sense, She struggled with it. And yet, this gift has been given to those of us who believe we're here, right? To say, look, as Barret was just touching on, this is not the reality. Truth is true and nothing else exists. And that's just such a beautiful place to be. And so as we get this glimmers of it, as we get this awakening taking place, once you've had the experience, you can't really say I didn't have it, right? It's kind of hard to do, I tell stories about, just different things that happen in my life, like being a 7-year-old child and having this experience of, what I came to refer as, later in my life as my higher power, right? Having this experience as a 7, 8-year-old, right? And having it again when I was in the Marine Corps, of all places, having it one day, this experience of this power and this understanding, this clarity, this light that was shining on this story of darkness that I was living in, right? And
Charlie,
yes.
time to repeat for us those 2 experiences, what they were for you.
Yeah, well, the first one, when I was younger, I had been kicked out of the house.
At 7?
At 7. Just temporary. It was like, get out of here. You're driving me crazy. Go outside and play, right? So I was probably in the house whining about something. And I went out and I was laying down in the front yard and I was looking at the clouds above. And I had this recognition that I'm here for a reason. I had no idea what the reason was. But it was this understanding, this clarity that I was here for a reason, and it wasn't to be whining at my mother. And so that was that first one. Now, I did not recognize what that was at the time it happened. It was later on in studying the Course and reading and working with this and going to this understanding that, all of this is happening for a reason, right? The awakening is happening for a reason. I think I'm asleep. That the clarity on that came, that the understanding of what that was, I was in meditation or reading one morning, whatever it was, and went, oh, that's what happened when I was 7, So it was many, many years later, decades later, that experience came, right? And in the Marine Corps, I've told this story before, I was in bayonet training. So we were jokingly, when I got back from boot camp, my friends were joking with me about being a trained killer. And in essence, that's what I was, right? That's what a Marine was. And in boot camp, you're trained to be a killer. And in bayonet training, you're trained to do it with a big ass blade on the end of a rifle. It's pretty scary stuff. And it's all psychological training. They get you in a huge group. There's a drill instructor on a big platform in front of us, and he's screaming into a microphone, right? About stabbing the gooks and it's just this getting you totally worked up. And as you're learning how to do the plunges and the rips and the tears and the different, hitting them with the butt and, just this god-awful exercise on killing another human being is really what it was. And I was totally wrapped up in the psychology of it. I was ready to go. I was ready to jump into Vietnam and just do my killing, right? I was a killing machine. I was being trained to do that. We left the grounds we were on, right? The dirt patch we were on, and we're going back to our barracks, marching in formation. And this question came, this clarity came to me, and it's basically said, look where you just were. There was a voice, right? It was something other than Charlie that was just, at that table, right? Charlie and that salad. There was another voice that said, look where you just were. Look where you just were. Look what you just bought into, And I'm marching along, I can't really say anything, but this recognition came through me that, oh my God, there's something else that's observing this. There's something else inside of me that's saying, wait a minute here. There's got to be a better way, right? Really is what it's saying. There's got to be a better way, because what you just experienced is pure insanity. And again, the recognition of that came later. It was many years later as I'm sitting working with on this path, going, oh, remember that? Remember when that happened? Oh yes, I do. It's a real clear experience for me. Again, experiential, that there's something going on here. Right? So there was I can't say, I guess I can say, there, even now in this recognition, there's a joy to be experienced. So as I look upon the 7-year-old, that was a joyous experience. I knew I was here for a reason. I was in peace at that moment, right? And listening to this voice coming back from bayonet training, I was in peace for a moment. Just a moment, maybe a little glimmer of it, but the peace was, there's got to be another way. Because this is insane. This is crazy. So, that was, thank you for asking for that, because it does bring it back, always does,
With the great stories.
So, Barret just touched on that people were, the family situation he's talking about, people calling out for love. So as Jesus teaches us, we're either experiencing that love or we're calling out for that love. And there's a section in here about Christmas as the end of sacrifice. It says, so it is that in all your seeking for love, you seek for sacrifice and find it. This is the way we work in the ego world. Yet you find not love. It is impossible to deny what love is and still recognize it. The meaning of love lies in what you have cast outside yourself. It has no meaning apart from you. It is what you prefer to keep that has no meaning. So again, that's a story of this, casting this out, casting truth aside, and buying into our story of that we've made up, right? And making that our reality, And there is no peace in this. There can never be peace in this. We cannot experience love in this. We can only experience continued fear and separation, because that's the foundation that this is all built on.
So we've been blathering on for about an hour now.
My goodness.
Now, we've been sharing for about an hour. So as usual, we do like to open it up to any comments, questions, sharings, or as always, we always have a lot to keep saying. But yeah, this is the time for any feedback or thoughts you guys have.
wanted to go back to your story with your mom. Do you ask for help with that? Is that something you consciously ask for to help to see it or help to know what to do?
Yeah.
Because it's easy to just plow ahead and think, oops, I shouldn't have
true.
said that.
Yeah.
You know, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And
So,
that always comes to you then. So
well, I don't always, but I would say often.
Okay, well, all right, yeah.
Yeah. And usually just in the asking for that help, what I find is I start to feel more peaceful. You know, because I know I'm not alone. The problem, the ego is the idea of aloneness, right? The
Yes.
ego is the idea I'm apart from everyone else. And I'm not going to get my way, or there's no way this is going to work out, all these sort of ego thoughts. So just asking for help, it reminds us that we're not alone. You know, it reminds us that we have help. So whether you think of it as Jesus or Holy Spirit or even some other symbol, when we ask for that help, say of angels or whatever, then all of a sudden you're feeling less alone. And it's helping us to access our right mind more and more. When we're in our right mind, we're not defensive, we're not attacking. I mean, it's actually two sides of the same coin. You know, Jesus teaches us when you defend yourself, you know, you are attacked. Or you're attacking or something, basically. That's the message. So, yeah, when we're in our right mind and we're asking for help, all of a sudden we're like, okay, well, there's a way forward altogether. Now, in this situation, the way forward might not be all of these particular bodies being in the same room on a particular day, you know. But what does that really matter in heaven, right? So it's important, you know, as we go through these things, not to deny our emotions, and that's kind of why I keep making that point, is that this world being an illusion can be used to just smother over what we're actually feeling, right? There's a term for that. You may have heard of it. It's called spiritual bypassing. So it's using spiritual concepts to bypass what you're going through, right? And it's not very helpful. Jesus himself calls this a particularly unworthy form of denial. Right? So we do want to deny what's not true, but we don't want to hide it. We don't want to tuck it away in a corner and just say, I'm a Course in Miracles student. I don't feel sad. I don't feel angry. I don't feel betrayed. You know, whatever these emotions are going through are. We actually want to let those things come up and be seen while we're holding the hand of Holy Spirit. And as we do that, then they actually move through. I often use the analogy of like leaves floating down a river. You know, all of our emotions and feelings are sort of like leaves floating down a river. And we're standing on the riverbank. Well, if it's a particularly upsetting emotion, it's almost like we're jumping into the river to grab at the leaves. And we're getting soaked in the process. But what we want to learn to do is actually just stand on the riverbank. And again, stand with Jesus, stand with Holy Spirit, but watch them go by. So we're still feeling the feelings. You know, I've had some tears this week around this situation, but I've let myself feel them, and I haven't judged myself for them. I haven't said I'm a bad Course in Miracles student, you know, because I'm not at peace. You know, I've just let that all sort of flow through, and then what I find is the more I can do that, the more quickly I come back to peace. And again, as I was sharing, part of what I brought this up is just actually kind of how surprising how peaceful I've been through this whole situation this week. I mean, it really has been a miracle. It really has been a miracle to me. And I just keep feeling the happiness. So, and I think it's also just helpful to see that the Course is a cumulative process, right? So a lot of these big issues, right? Like I said, however many years it's been unfolding in my life, it's something that I keep coming back to these principles. And some people would say, well, you know, if I do enough forgiveness, how come things don't get better? Well, some things do, some things don't, right? That's the dualistic world that we live in. But what can change, and what has changed in my experience, is that I can be more at peace with it. And that I don't need to make someone an enemy in this scenario. You know, there's that idea Jesus talks about in the Song of Prayer a bit, there's sort of this idea of praying for one's enemies. And it basically says, well, if you believe you have enemies, you're the one that needs prayer. Right?
Much better to use the prayer at the end of this section, I think.
Yeah, it's
You know,
beautiful. I
this
was just
idea-
reading it.
Yeah. Say then to your brother, I give to you the Holy Spirit as part of myself. I know that you will be released unless I want to use you to imprison myself.
Oh, yeah.
Where is that one?
Page 329, right at the end of the
Yeah.
section that we're reading here. I honestly, it's interesting the way this section starts, and you were talking about that, Charlie, because it also contains the sentence, do not try longer to keep apart your thoughts from the thought that has been given you. That idea, and I like that concept of spiritual bypassing. Do I want to keep my thoughts separate from the thought,
Truth.
my awakening to the Holy Spirit, the
Yeah.
thought that's been given to me? But I'll stay over here and intellectualize it for a while because that's too hard.
Right.
I don't want to go there. Yeah.
I don't want to go to truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I go back to the banquet.
Yeah.
That's good.
Einstein called it this in that first paragraph too. There's that concept of wanting to stay in our little special relationships and not accept that we're part of something greater. Einstein called it the optical delusion.
Yeah.
That rather than accept that we're part of a greater universe, a greater being, right? We stick with these little,
Yeah.
interactions that we can have.
Exactly what Jesus is telling us here, right?
Yeah. So this whole world is a little bit of a optical delusion, then, right? When we look at it that way, and it's done that way intentionally.
Totally optical.
Totally, not a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Totally. It just seems normal because we've been experiencing it for so long that it seems like this is what is real and true, but it's not. It's not. To actually believe that we're seeing through eyes at something outside of us. Think about that at its core. What is that but a belief in separation, right? There are no eyes in heaven, right? There's not something apart to see or sense in some other way. So when we think of all of our senses, they are actually trying to prove the separation is real. Sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, all of them. Any other kind of senses. Proprioception, to throw a big word out there.
Mm-hmm.
These things are all trying to prove there's something else out there. But what we don't realize is that these senses were made up to do that. These senses were made up to prove the separation real. And then we rely on them to give us the proof. It's faulty logic when we think of it, right? We're using something false to try to prove itself real. But what we're getting more and more is that it's just not like that. And it's never been like that. So actually it fits with another thing I picked to share here. And it's like, how do we come into an experience of this idea of oneness, right? We know these concepts fairly well at this point, but how do we actually live them? He says, this is near the end of the text, on page 662. He says, by focusing upon the good in him, in your brother, the body grows decreasingly persistent in your sight, and will at length be seen as little more than just a shadow circling round the good. And this will be your concept of yourself when you have reached the world beyond the sight your eyes alone can offer you to see. For you will not interpret what you see without the aid, capital A, aid, that God has given you. And in his sight, there is another world. This is the sight with true vision. This is the sight with the inner eye. So.
Yeah, I love the way this meshes all the time. So I get towards the end of this section on Christmas as the end of sacrifice. Actually, it's kind of halfway through it. Paragraph 5, the beginning of this. We'll talk about a couple different paragraphs here, but beginning of paragraph 5, it says, as long as you perceive the body as your reality, so long will you perceive yourself as lonely and deprived. And we've touched on that today, right? And so long will you also perceive yourself as a victim of sacrifice, justified in sacrificing others. And I wanted to point out this concept in the Course that there's no hierarchy in illusions, right? All illusions are the same. Any story I tell myself about an ego-based story is the same. So somebody was commenting to me the other day, a Course student, that their special relationship doesn't seem to struggle. You know, it's just going through this life, skipping along, everything's happy, and I don't think that way, sort of thing. You know? And my thought reaction to it was, it's always there. If we're buying into this, it's always there. It can be just little tiny judgments. It can be little tiny things that are going on in our lives. They're no different than the big judgment that we come up with, you know, that, Hitler was a murderer, you know, the big stories. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as being upset with the driver, right? There's no hierarchy in illusions. So as long as you perceive the body as reality, you perceive yourself as lonely and deprived. Barret touched on that earlier. So in the holy instant, which is this recognition of this peace, right? This recognition that this is truth is true, and nothing else is. In the holy instant, the condition of love is met. For minds are joined without the body's interference, which is what you were just saying, right? And where there is communication, there is peace. So how do we communicate? You know, I'm communicating with my brother, not the body, but I'm recognizing my brother as the Son of God. There's the communication that takes place. Now it's done on that level, not on the level of two bodies, right? The Prince of Peace was born to reestablish the condition of love by teaching that communication remains unbroken even if the body is destroyed. This body can be gone, and the communication that is transpiring between me and somebody else still exists, right? The brother to brother, the understanding of oneness is still in existence. It's not going anywhere. The clarity of the awakening is not disappearing because Charlie's body dies, right? And if you understand this lesson, it is destroyed, provided that, the Prince of Peace was born to reestablish the condition of love by teaching that communication remains unbroken, even if the body is destroyed, provided that you see not the body as the necessary means of communication. I don't need a body to recognize the Son of God, right? Which must be of the mind, cannot be sacrificed. Where then is sacrifice? The lesson I was born to teach, I being Jesus, right? The lesson I was born to teach and still would teach to all my brothers is that sacrifice is nowhere and love is everywhere. So Christmas as the end of sacrifice. It's really what he was saying. The light is in the world, right? Represented by this star in heaven, by this little baby in the manger, right? The light is in the world. The light is inside all of us, right? My brother is light. I am light. That's all we truly are. We are in this oneness together, right? There's no need to sacrifice anything. I don't have to give anything up. It is the truth. Truth is true, and that's all there is. There's no giving up of anything. So this tiny mad idea, like you were just talking about, like Barret was just talking about, this tiny mad idea, this idea of giving something up that isn't real, you can't give up something that doesn't exist. And that's really what we're saying here. Christmas is the end of sacrifice. It's recognizing the light inside all of us is all the truth there is, and we need to give up nothing.
I think that's the comfort that you were saying. There's comfort too. I mean, when, at least as I understand the story of when Einstein talked about this optical delusion, and he even uses the vision of imprisoning ourselves.
Yes.
You know, so it's so Course-like, but it's, you know, it's Einstein. And it was in response to somebody asking him about how he would counsel somebody to deal with the death of a 16-year-old child. Mm-hmm. You know, like why does that happen? You know, and it's just so powerful because that was the comfort that he was trying to bring to it is you're not limited to these special relationships. You're part of something that's so much bigger, and we trick ourselves into thinking that that's all we are, and that's where we suffer because when you lose one of those, right? That's very, you know, that's the sacrifice. But you don't need that to communicate, as you were saying. I think there's a comfort to it if you can open yourself up to it, and that's, you know, it just made me think how how Einstein came to that term,
Right.
that realization.
Right.
It was a comfort.
Because he was searching for the truth.
Yeah, it was a comfort. He was trying to be a comfort.
I was listening to NPR the other day, and they were interviewing the woman who just won Nobel Peace Prize for chemistry. And he was asking her about her life. Was she surprised at this? And she said, yeah, I was asleep at the time, when they called me, and I didn't expect it. And so then he asked a few questions about the people in her life, that she had been married before and that she'd lost a husband and a son. And he said, how do you feel about that? How does it take you anywhere? And she said, and I thought this really was very course-like in its own way. I miss those people, but I am so happy that I had them in my life, that they were a part of me. And it was kind of like a very settling kind of thing, talking about what you were saying about losing I can't imagine what I would feel losing any of my special relationships, but that made it seem less painful and more at peace if you say, I'm sorry they're not in my life anymore, I miss them, but I am glad that I had them in my life. And that's a switch of the perspective.
Yeah. It's just one quick second, because it reminded me of someplace I wanted to go earlier, and that is this expression of gratitude. In all of this, in all that we're going through, in every little lesson I get, having an opportunity to say thank you, right, for this lesson. Thank you for this person in my life. Thank you for the message deliverer, Thank you for this experience. Thank you for this joy, That expression of gratitude, I think, is so important for us to remember that. I'm not doing this by myself, This is not Charlie's work here, I'm simply receiving this because why? We're giving it, right? In this same section, Jesus talks about that, the giving and the receiving, the Son of God. When I recognize the Son of God in another, I'm loving the Son of God, right? And I'm loving the Son of God, I'm loving the Father. And I'm loving the Father, I'm loved by the Father. And I'm loved by the Son of God. It's just a cyclical thing. And the purest form of prayer that in the Song of Prayer tells us is expression of gratitude to God. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? One of the things that I find most comforting about the Course is the repeated refrain that there is no death. And so that when in the optical illusion, it looks like we have lost someone. We can't ever lose someone. Just like Charlie said, we may not be seeing the body, but actually that someone is not only eternal, but a part of us eternally. So we can't ever be separate from someone. Just like when they leave the room, they're not lost to us. We just can't see them. For me, that's helpful.
It's true. Yeah, that's a great point. And I was getting an image as we were talking. One of the concepts that Jesus gives us is the great raise. Every now and then he talks about the great raise. And in essence, that's sort of like an idea of what we are. We think we're a body, but the great rays are like, just like a stream of light. Well, if you had like an image of it, like a stream of light, and you thought you could break it up into like little chunks, like a chain, one link of a chain after another. See, like the body is like believing we're a chain link when we're actually the stream of light. Yeah. Again, it's kind of just a metaphor here.
You can't take one of those links out.
Right. Yeah.
Well, because people can be lost to us in the illusion. I mean, I think of your story, about between fiance and mother, right? I mean, people can be lost to us in the illusion if we allow them to. Physically gone.
That's true.
Yeah. But as Marilee said, there's a part of us that's always together. Whether we're not talking to someone, whether we're in a different room from someone, whatever the dynamic is, on a deeper level, we're actually all together. And that actually, of course, as always, fits right with what I wanted to share a little, which is from chapter 19. This is in the second obstacle to peace, which is the belief the body is valuable for what it offers. Right? So we're
one of the things I highlight.
We're switching from the idea of the body back up to the idea that we are spirit. This is a big part of Jesus's work with us, is to change our identity from believing we're a body most repeated line in the Course, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. And as that shifts, the thought of losing someone also shifts, because as we're getting more and more, loss is impossible. It is literally impossible. Within this world it happens, sure. Bodies shift and change, bodies leave rooms, bodies stop, bodies end.
Well, when we turn our back on someone, we lose them.
Mm.
When we decide to hold them in judgment. In the illusion, we've lost them.
Yeah.
That's where the prayer is so helpful in this section, this Christmas section. The prayer speaks right to that.
Yeah, and there's a great couple sentences here too. He says, this is what you believe that it would dispossess and leave you homeless, right? This being this concept of being a body, like we would lose that. He says, and it is this for which you would deny a home to peace. Right? So we've denied a home to peace when we're buying into this system, right? So again, we're just continuing to look at the same point from different angles over and over again. This whole presentation has been about how do we let go of our attachment to the individual self. And it's a practice. It's a practice. Don't feel bad if you don't feel like you're getting it, right? This is an ongoing journey. Sometimes I say, I describe it, if you had like a wall of ice, right? And the wall of ice was several feet thick. And you started to try to melt this wall of ice. And you were melting and you're melting and you're melting. And 10 years later, you look at the wall and you're like, oh my God, this wall of ice is still here. But what you maybe not are acknowledging is that the wall of ice is now only a foot thick when it started out like 5 feet thick. It's a lot less solid. I mean, it still looks like a wall, still feels like a wall, but it's not the same. And your attachment to the ego is not the same either.
That's a nice thought.
Yeah.
So on that wall of ice thing, I can create those very easily. When I was away, I, for some reason, knocked my elbow against something. And I woke up the next morning and there was spots of blood on my sheet because I bleed easily due to whatever condition you want to call it. And I was so upset because I'm in a hotel and I've got this messy sheet, and Heather was there and I was in tears. And she says, Mom, you're not a body. And you're not a body. You didn't do anything. And I'm going, how can I so easily forget that over a tiny, stupid little cut? And what different, you are not, and I had to go and apologize and tell my daughter-in-law that I'm so sorry that, and Heather's just going, Mom, you are not a body. It's like, and so when you say it's okay, so I had created this enormous wall. And just by that reminder, it melted a little bit. Like, the Wicked Witch and the Wizard of Oz, I'm melting. So I try to use that, but I thank you for that because it's such a stupid, I felt so stupid even crying over it. But that reminder, that sort of like vice, that sort of, no, it wasn't the vice, that comforting, those arms saying, you are not a body.
Yeah.
Is Heather a Course in Miracles student?
What?
Is Heather your daughter?
Yes, I'm sorry, Heather's my
And
daughter.
she's a Course in Miracles student?
Yes, she really is.
Oh, okay. Well, she
She's
must have been to use that term.
She definitely is.
Yeah. What a great reminder. And what a helpful kind of message. And to remember, one of the things that I say is that it's really important not to be hard on ourselves for our emotions, because we're so good at judging ourselves. As a society and as different families, we're raised to say these emotions are okay, happiness, but these emotions are not. And maybe sadness is on that list, maybe judgment is on that list, maybe hate is on that list, all these sorts of other things. And a part of our work, I think, is in getting less and less judgmental around our experiences. And to, like you just shared, remind yourself that you're actually held, just like a child would be held. If they're having a bad day, or if they're having a tantrum, you kind of hold that toddler even through the squirming, through the upset, and eventually it passes. Right? So if we use that image on ourselves, I sometimes like to say, if you're going through a rough patch, consider how an angel would be looking at you as you're going through the situation. What would the perspective be that this angel would be holding you in? And try to bring that to yourself. Because it would only be love. It would only be kindness. It would only be caring. We can give that to ourselves if we are open to it, right? So this is part of our practice, is to go there. So
Beautiful.
I did a little bit more of my bounty to share. Okay.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle. It is a miracle. I was like, man, I don't know how many jokes I came up with this time. I will credit Gary Renard with this one. I first heard it from him, although I just found it again online. So an aspiring yogi wanted to find a guru. So he went to an ashram, and his elderly guru told him, you can stay here, but we have one important rule. All students observe a vow of silence. You will only be allowed to speak one sentence, and only after 12 years. So after practicing for 12 long years, the day came when the student could say his one sentence. He said to the guru, the bed is too hard. He kept going for another 12 years of hard spiritual practices and austere discipline. Then came his opportunity to speak again. He commented, the food is not very good. 12 more years of hard work, and he got the chance to speak once again, this time after 36 years of practicing this. He announced, I quit. His guru retorted, good. All you've done the whole time is complain, complain, complain. So I did actually have one page here from the workbook that I thought would be a nice ending for us today. In addition to that prayer and our section we've been looking at, this is in lesson 186. So it's the last couple of paragraphs. So just to wash that joke taste out of your mouth here. His gentle voice is calling from the known to the unknowing. He would comfort you, although he knows no sorrow. He would make a restitution, though he is complete. A gift to you, although he knows that you have everything already. He has thoughts which answer every need his son perceives, although he sees them not. For love must give, and what is given in his name takes on the form most useful in a world of form. These are the forms which never can deceive, because they come from formlessness itself. Forgiveness is an earthly form of love, which as it is in heaven has no form. Yet what is needed here is given here as it is needed. In this form you can fulfill your function even here, although what love will mean to you when formlessness has been restored to you is greater still. Salvation of the world depends on you who can forgive. Such is your function here. Yeah, so that's lesson 186, salvation of the world depends on me. So what a beautiful sharing today.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. So next month, our January Good News will be on the second Saturday of the month instead of the first.
Which is January 12th.
January 12th. And then February will be the first Saturday, right?
Yes. That will be on Groundhog's Day, February 2nd.
Groundhog's Day. Now, so it's this repeated thing, right? Groundhog's Day. Well, this is the end of the repeat for the time being, because Barrett's going to go to Germany after that. So I would just like to invite you all to be sure to be here for our going away good news with Barret and Charlie, because Barret will be leaving. We're going to continue. Hopefully, we're going to continue this online.
Yes. More than hopefully, we will.
Yeah, we will. So
Yes.
Barret will be in Germany with his sausage, and we'll be here in the morning with our coffee. And anyway, so we continue. We're going to continue that online.
Okay, so the first one is when?
January 12th, February
2nd.
2nd.
There'll be a showing of Bill Murray and Groundhog's Day.
I love that movie. So I'm sure we'll be referencing it.
Yeah, and then the other thing, just a kind of a heads up, just yesterday, Barret and I led a retreat last spring in Sedona, Arizona. Healing Through A Course in Miracles was the title of it, and that retreat is going to take place again this year without Barret. I'm going to lead a retreat there in April. And so I'm just kind of throwing that out right now because I just verbally committed to doing it yesterday. The contracts aren't done and all that. But so it's that same weekend right after income taxes. So it's the 19th and 20th or whatever that weekend is of April. So we're going to start getting that put together with flyers and that sort of stuff. So there'll be more information on it later. And this is all going out to you as well on the internet.
April 19th and 20th.
Is that what it is?
That's Easter weekend, just so you know.
No, that's the weekend after that.
Oh, it's the weekend after that then?
And Elizabeth Long will be your one
Yeah,
of your
Elizabeth
main
Long is gonna.
co-presenters.
Yeah, she's gonna co-present with me and help facilitate it. And so it'll be the two of us doing it.
And Claudia Pasick, who had led
Yeah.
Kundalini Yoga
Yeah.
this year, will also be rejoining.
She's going to rejoin us and lead yoga again and partake in whatever Holy Spirit delivers to us. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And I don't know you.
Yeah. Well, I guess since we're talking about retreats, I am going to Germany, but I am going to come back to the States for a spell this coming year too. And while I'm back, I will be leading a healing retreat up in Wisconsin for a weekend called Clearing the Way for Spirit, where I'll be using principles of the Course and my healing modality, the witness energy healing. So that's actually Father's Day weekend, June 24th through 26th, I believe. But just a heads up on that too. Then more information will be forthcoming. So. And other than that, yes, just gratitude. So good joining with you all today. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
I do have a question.
Thank you.
So